She arrived at the battlefront with 38 nurses ready to give aid to thousands of injured and dying, only to be banned from entering the hospital by British Army hierarchy, bureaucracy and BS. This is the story of how persistence conquered madness as one woman was about to push for change. Attractive, knowledgeable, lively wit, engaging conversationist, Florence Nightingale was the daughter of an affluent English family, born in Italy in 1820 while her parents were there on a 3-year sojourn. She was named after the city of her birth. As a child she had no material wants, nor for that matter during her lifetime. Like other girls of her standing, her family fully expected and anticipated she'd marry someone of equal intellect and capacity. And she did meet someone, Richard Monckton Milnes, who courted her for several years. But at age 29, Florence decided to call it off, fearing it would drag her away from her real passion and mission in life. By age 17, Florence decided to be a nurse to help the sick and needy. But her family found this idea offensive. Nurses had a poor reputation of being untrained and unmarried with children. Drunkenness was common. Hospitals were a filthy place, so unsanitary that sickness and disease spread easily amongst patients and carers. Over the years, in spite of her family's repeated attempts to dissuade her, she remained adamant and completed 2 years nursing training at Kaiserwerth in Germany when she was 29. On her return, in spite of the family protest, she took up a position as superintendent of a new institution for sick noblewomen in Harley Street, England, and quickly surprised promoters of the institution with her degree of efficiency and organisation. To improve patient care, she introduced bell rings, lifts to bring meals from kitchens, special diets, bulk buying of supplies to reduce cost, and strict discipline amongst her carefully selected nurses. A year later this appointment ended, but not by choice. It was 1854. England and France declare war on Russia. With Russian forces besieging the Turks, British troops were hastily dispatched to their aid on the Crimean Peninsula and the Black Sea. Sebastopol, a highly fortified Russian navy base, was the prime target, but enemy troop numbers had been severely underestimated. On top of this, British forces were hopelessly undersupplied. Cholera, heat exhaustion and fatigue took their toll even before the Russians were engaged. Of 27,000 British troops sent to the front, 1,000 fell ill with cholera even before a single shot was fired. The British public were outraged upon hearing of the appalling treatment of British battle casualties. The Turkish army barracks at Scutari, a Turkish town across the Black Sea from the peninsula, had been converted into a makeshift hospital. Poor ventilation, no beds, bandages, nurses or operating tables. Only a few elderly orderlies and 90 doctors for several thousand casualties. Compared to the attention the French had given their wounded, such poor planning on behalf of the British side was an outrage. Back home, Sidney Herbert, long-time friend of the Nightingale family and Florence, was British Secretary of State at war. He took action. In an unprecedented move, appointed Florence as superintendent of the female nursing establishment of the English General Hospital in Turkey. No woman had ever nursed a British soldier in an official capacity. Army was a male domain, and wounded soldiers an army matter, and here was a civilian appointed to superintend over military medical affairs. Outrage and prejudice festered. Florence was well aware of the difficulties she'd be facing and the extent of personal resources she'd have to draw on in the battle against officialdom. When Florence and her nurses departed for the front, she expected an immediate role, as 400 injured cavalry soldiers from the Battle of Balaclava were due to arrive at the same time. But on her arrival, her and her team were given a cold reception by military commanders, who directed them to their quarters and banned them from entering the hospital. They were snubbed by doctors and military commanders for 4 days. Meanwhile, Florence kept her cool and busied her team preparing bandages while waiting for an invite that never came. But eventually medical authorities had to relent when overwhelmed by wounded, with 4,000 casualties in a temporary hospital that could only accommodate 2,500. Upon entering the hospital, Florence discovered conditions far worse than she expected, with bureaucracy gone mad as 27,000 fresh gowns for the injured were tied down in a paper war. Every requisition, no matter how small, had to be countersigned by 2 doctors. Orderlies couldn't fetch a hot water bottle for Florence's nurses without signed approval from a doctor. No proper cooking facilities, no brooms, brushes, or basic cleaning equipment. Florence acted quickly. When she couldn't obtain gowns through the normal channels, she paid for thousands of them out of her own funds. Likewise with meals. To fix the problem, she had 2 kitchens constructed. At her own expense, she shipped over a top English chef to supervise them and provide special meals suited for patients' needs. She had ovens built so that soldiers whose teeth and gums had rotted with scurvy could receive soft bread instead of rock-hard military-issue biscuits. There were no knives and forks. Laundry had been cleaned off-site by contractors using cold water and returned germ-infested. Commandeering an old house, she had army engineers install boilers so clean sheets and laundry was possible, and employing soldiers' wives to run it. With the hospital in disrepair, Army employed 125 local workers, but when they went on strike, Florence engaged her own team of 200 and paid from her own funds. She soon had wards ready to receive 500. The impact of her swift action was evident in the 6 months following her arrival. The death toll in the hospital fell 2/3, from 427 per thousand down to 22. It was not just the wounds killing them, but the cholera, diarrhea, dysentery and unsanitary conditions. Now with the nurses' cleaning regime, more would survive, and they did. It was only after Florence got into a position of success she was then able to achieve more. Once the hospital had reached a more operational state, Florence, who had become known as the Lady with the Lamp, broadened her focus to usher in more improvements such as a small school, singing classes, a reading room, constructed a cafe, and she took measures to avert convalescing British soldiers blowing their money on alcohol by setting up a money order office, offering to forward money home to the wives and families of soldiers. Army admin staff had no such service and scoffed at the idea. The British soldier, who they knew better, liked to drink, so they snubbed her plan. They were mistaken. Over the next 6 months, Florence dispatched £71,000 back to families from their wounded husbands and fathers, along with thousands of letters. Still, the positive results didn't stem the tide of resistance. Florence was continually battling with army personnel and bureaucrats over regulations, orders, patient care and action. While some military and medical staff were brazenly defiant, there were others openly supporting her cause. Writing countless letters to supporters back home, Florence waged a war on multiple fronts in an effort to improve hospital conditions, supply, regulations and care of the sick and infirm. When finally returning to England in 1856, almost 2 years later, she was a national hero. Now aged 36, she avoided accepting the many offers to attend functions and speaking engagements, instead beginning a dogged campaign of correspondence that was to last for the next 50 years. Pushing for a royal commission into the reform of army medical services, Florence found a respectful and willing ally in Queen Victoria, who admired the modest but gutsy woman. Florence advised on plans for new military hospitals, wrote a 1,000-page document, notes on matters affecting the health, efficiency and hospital admin of the British Army. She'd always displayed an interest in mathematics and statistics from a young age and had begun collecting stats on hospitals and even before the Crimean campaign. So this fact and figure collecting continued throughout her life, allowing her to be well armed whenever fighting for the cause. Her time in the Crimea had shown her, with proper food, shelter, clothing, supplies, adequate systems and general hygiene, many of the cases of illness and disease she had treated there would never have occurred in the first place. For 4 years she pushed for the funding of an army medical school and then helped advise on its regulations and curriculum. She published books on hospital design and regulation and nursing care. Then, tapping into a newly established Nightingale Fund from her many supporters, she turned her attention to creating the world's first professional training school for nurses at St Thomas's Hospital in London in 1860. She was often approached for advice on hospital design in cities from around the world and championed for the development of hospitals with separate independent units to minimise the spread of infection. There is something buried in the list of Florence's achievements that makes her resilience and determination even more remarkable. for she never sat on committees, attended state functions, or visited any of the places that implemented her innovations. After contracting Crimean fever while in Turkey, she found herself mostly bedridden after her return, suffering from continual breathlessness, nausea and headaches. She remained an invalid for the rest of her life. From her sick room she penned her correspondence, held audiences with lords, dukes and viceroys, and advised military commanders, hospital administrators and civil servants. So it was not her physical presence that ensured the accomplishment of her wishes, but the power of her pen. She was content to allow those she advised to deliver the solutions and reap the satisfaction and kudos for her innovations. She died unexpectedly from a short illness in her home in London in August 1910, aged 90. Through her focus, determination and persistence, Florence became an unstoppable powerhouse for her cause, revered as the pioneer of modern nursing. Thanks for listening. If you liked it, please give a thumbs up. And if Florence's story inspired you to set some goals of your own, there's a free copy of CTA 90's goal setting template below. And don't forget to subscribe here for more of the best inspiring stories, only here on CTA 90.